The manila envelope landed on my desk with a soft thud. Inside was the latest valuation of Morgan Technologies, my Uncle David's once mighty software empire. I didn't need to open it, the numbers had been splashed across every business publication this morning. Their stock had plummeted 68% after 3 consecutive quarters of catastrophic losses. The unshakable titan of enterprise software was crumbling. I leaned back in my chair, letting the morning sunlight warm my face through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown Seattle office. The view of Puget Sound stretched out before me, boats dotting the water like tiny white brushstrokes on blue canvas. My fingers traced the edge of my old laptop, the same one I'd used to write my first lines of code 5 years ago, the one that had sparked endless mockery at family gatherings. "Still playing with your little hobby?" Uncle David's voice echoed in my memory, his tone dripping with condescension at last year's Thanksgiving dinner. "When are you going to get a real job, Alexandra? There's always a place for you at Morgan Tech, starting in the mailroom, of course." The room had erupted in laughter. Even my parents smiled apologetically, clearly embarrassed by their 28-year-old daughter who'd walked away from a promising career in finance to play with computers. What they didn't know was that by then, my hobby, quantum solutions, had already secured its first major client. While they were laughing, I was revolutionizing how artificial intelligence integrated with enterprise systems. I just did it quietly, methodically, without the flashy press releases and self-congratulatory LinkedIn posts my uncle was so fond of. My phone buzzed. Speaking of Uncle David. "Alexandra." His voice was strained, missing its usual bombastic confidence. "Do you have a moment to talk?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Of course, Uncle David. How are things at Morgan Technologies?" A heavy pause. "You've seen the news, I assume?" "I may have caught a headline or two." He cleared his throat. "Listen, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I've been looking into what you've built with Quantum, your AI integration platform. It's remarkable, revolutionary, even." Now he noticed. After 5 years of dismissing my work, suddenly he'd developed an appreciation for my hobby. "That's kind of you to say," I replied evenly, "though I recall you having a different opinion last Thanksgiving." Another pause, longer this time. "About that, I was wrong. We were all wrong. And now I'm wondering if you'd consider a partnership. Morgan Tech needs what you've built. We need your innovation, your fresh perspective." I glanced at the framed photo on my desk, me at 16, winning my first coding competition. Uncle David had been there but left early, declaring programming competitions cute but not serious business. Next to it sat this morning's Wall Street Journal, featuring an in-depth analysis of Quantum Solutions' meteoric rise and our groundbreaking AI frameworks that were reshaping the industry. "A partnership?" I kept my voice neutral. "That's an interesting proposition, though I should mention I'm quite busy at the moment. We just closed our Series C funding round, $500 million at an $3 billion valuation." I heard him inhale sharply. The numbers were public now, no point hiding them anymore. "Perhaps we should discuss this in person," I continued. "I have some time next week. You remember where my office is, right? The entire top floor of the Morgan Technologies building. I bought it last month when your company started liquidating assets." Silence. "Alexandra." His voice cracked slightly. "We're family. Surely we can work something out." Family. Now he remembered we were family. "You're right," I said softly. "We are family, which is why I'll give you something I don't offer others: honesty. Morgan Technologies is failing because you refused to innovate. You dismissed new ideas, my ideas, because they didn't come packaged in the way you expected. You mistook humility for weakness, passion for frivolity." I stood, walking to the window. From here, I could see the Morgan Technologies logo being carefully removed from the building's facade. Soon it would be replaced with the Quantum Solutions emblem, a simple, elegant design that represented everything I'd built while they weren't watching. "But you're right about one thing," I continued. "We should discuss this in person. My assistant will send over an appointment. And Uncle David, bring the latest financials. If we're going to talk about acquisition terms, I'll need to see everything." He made a choked sound. "Acquisition? You want to buy Morgan Technologies?" "Want is a strong word," I replied, "but someone needs to save what's left of the company. It might as well be family." After hanging up, I sat back down at my desk and opened my laptop, not the sleek new one provided by the company, but my old one, its cover still adorned with stickers from coding boot camps and hackathons. I pulled up an old email from 5 years ago, Uncle David's response to my request for seed funding. "Dear Alexandra. While your enthusiasm for programming is charming, I cannot in good conscience invest family money in what amounts to a hobby. Perhaps it's time to focus on more serious endeavors. Best. David Morgan, CEO, Morgan Technologies. I'd kept that email, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder. Success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. And I had done exactly that. One line of code at a time. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Carter, the board members are ready for you in the main conference room. Thank you, Sarah, I'll be right there. I stood, straightening my blazer. Through the glass walls of my office, I could see them gathered, some of the most influential figures in tech, now serving on my board. None of them had ever questioned whether my company was just a hobby. As I walked to the conference room, I passed the framed cover of Forbes magazine from last month. My photo was on it, alongside the headline, "The Quiet Revolution, How Alexander Carter's Hobby Became Tech's Next Giant." I smiled, remembering all the family dinners where I sat silently while Uncle David held court, boasting about Morgan Technologies' legacy. He never noticed me taking notes on my phone, documenting everything his company was doing wrong, building the blueprint for something better. The conference room doors opened. "Good morning," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "Let's discuss the Morgan Technologies acquisition." 3 hours later, I stood in my office again, looking out at the Seattle skyline as the sun began to set. Sarah entered quietly, placing a folder on my desk. "The latest proposal for Morgan Technologies is ready for your review," she said, "and your uncle's office confirmed his appointment for Monday at 9 a.m. Thank you, Sarah." I turned from the window. "Could you do me a favor? Find that old laptop I used to code on during family gatherings, the one everyone laughed at. I'd like it on my desk for Monday's meeting." She smiled, understanding immediately. "Of course, Ms. Carter." After she left, I picked up the folder, studying the numbers that would determine Morgan Technologies' fate. 5 years ago, Uncle David had said my ideas about AI integration were unrealistic. 3 years ago, he'd mocked my focus on user-centric design. Last year, he'd laughed at my predictions about where enterprise software was headed. Now, as his empire crumbled, those same ideas had built something he never saw coming. Not because I was smarter or more talented, but because I had done the one thing he never could. I listened. To developers, to clients, to the quiet voices that usually went unheard in an industry full of shouting. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Honey, about Uncle David. He's family, please be gentle." I thought about all the family gatherings where they'd been less than gentle with me. The dismissive comments, the pointed suggestions about real jobs, the way they'd minimized every achievement that didn't fit their definition of success. But she was right, they were family, which is why I'd make sure Morgan Technologies employees were protected in the acquisition, why I'd preserve the parts of the company that still held value, why I'd rebuild it into something better, alongside everything else I'd created while they weren't looking. I typed back, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle it professionally." Setting down my phone, I walked to the small table where I kept my most important mementos. Among them was a piece of paper, framed despite its coffee stains and wrinkles. It was the first line of code I'd ever written, back in high school. Below it, in my teenage handwriting, "Sometimes the biggest things start as hobbies." I smiled, thinking of Monday's meeting. Uncle David would arrive expecting to negotiate a partnership. Instead, he'd find himself in an acquisition discussion with the very person whose potential he'd dismissed for years, the same person who now controlled his company's fate. But I wouldn't gloat. I wouldn't remind him of every dismissive comment or condescending smile. Success isn't about revenge, it's about rising above, about building something so undeniable that the people who once doubted you have no choice but to see it. My intercom buzzed again. "Ms. Carter, the development team is ready for the daily stand-up." On my way, I took one last look at the Seattle skyline, at the building that would soon bear my company's name. Uncle David had spent years building walls to protect his empire. I'd spent those same years building bridges, connecting ideas and people in ways he never imagined possible. And on Monday, he'd finally understand the difference. The next morning, I arrived early, before the usual buzz of activity filled the office. I liked these quiet moments, when I could walk the floors and remember how it all started. Each empty desk represented someone who'd believed in my vision, who'd joined when Quantum Solutions was still seen as an upstart, a hobby company trying to compete with giants like Morgan Technologies. Sarah was already at her desk, efficient as always. "Good morning, Ms. Carter. I prepared the acquisition documents for Monday, and I found your old laptop." "Thank you, Sarah." I paused. "Did you know that laptop was a gift from Uncle David?" A graduation present when I finished my finance degree. He said it was for keeping track of investments. He never imagined I'd use it to build something that would eventually buy his company. She smiled. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? That it does. I entered my office, setting down my bag and powering up my computer. The morning news headlines were already flowing in. More coverage of Morgan Technology's decline and speculation about potential buyers. None of them had connected the dots yet. Hadn't realized that the quiet niece with the hobby was about to become their salvation. A notification popped up, another email from Uncle David. Alexandra. After our call yesterday, I did some research into Quantum Solutions' achievements over the past 5 years. I owe you an apology. What you've built isn't just impressive, it's extraordinary. I should have seen it sooner. Looking forward to our meeting on Monday. Best. David. I leaned back, letting his words sink in. 5 years of dismissal, followed by one desperate moment of recognition. Part of me wanted to savor it, to finally feel validated by the uncle whose approval I'd once desperately sought. But that part was smaller now, diminished by the confidence that comes from building something meaningful. My phone rang. It was Marcus, my head of engineering. Morning, Alex. You need to see this. Morgan Technologies just pushed a major update to their enterprise platform. It's not good. System crashes across their client base. Their support forums are exploding. I pulled up the technical reports, scanning the chaos unfolding across Morgan Technologies' network. In their desperate attempt to compete with modern platforms like ours, they'd rushed an update without proper testing. Now their clients, major corporations, government agencies, educational institutions, were facing critical system failures. How long until their clients start looking for alternatives? I asked. They already are. Our inquiry rate just spiked 300% in the last hour. I thought about Uncle David, about how his rush to maintain market dominance had led to this moment. He'd always said I was too methodical, too careful, too focused on getting things right instead of getting them done quickly. Start scaling up our support team, I told Marcus, and prep the migration tools. When these companies need to switch platforms, I want us ready. Already on it. Oh, and Alex? Remember when your uncle said our AI integration was unnecessarily complex at that tech conference last year? I laughed. Hard to forget. Well, that unnecessary complexity is exactly what these companies need right now. Sometimes being thorough isn't just good engineering, it's good business. After hanging up, I walked to the window, watching the morning sun reflect off the buildings downtown. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Uncle David was probably staring at the same reports I was. Realizing that his company's fate was sealed, he'd spend the weekend trying to salvage what he could, preparing counteroffers and desperate proposals for Monday's meeting. But I already knew how it would end, not because I was smarter or more capable, but because I'd never forgotten what it felt like to be underestimated. It had taught me to build things properly, to value substance over style, to listen to the quiet voices that often held the loudest truths. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Carter, your parents are here. They don't have an appointment, but..." I smiled. Of course they'd come. Send them in, Sarah. They entered cautiously, my mother clutching her purse, my father adjusting his tie nervously. The last time they'd been in this office, it had belonged to Uncle David. Now their daughter sat behind the desk, and they didn't quite know how to process that reality. "Alexandra," my mother started, "about Uncle David." "It's okay, Mom, this isn't about revenge. It's about doing what's right for both companies." "We had no idea," my father said softly. "All this time, when you were working late, when you missed family events. I was building something," I finished for him, "something that mattered." They looked around the office, taking in the awards, the press coverage, the evidence of success they'd somehow missed while focusing on Uncle David's more visible achievements. "We're sorry," my mother said. "We should have supported you more." I stood, walking around the desk to hug them both. "You did support me. You raised me to be persistent, to work hard, to believe in myself. The rest, I had to prove to myself more than anyone else." As they left, I noticed my father lingering, looking at the old laptop now sitting on a shelf behind my desk. "I remember when you used to bring that to family gatherings," he said. "We all thought you were just avoiding conversation, playing games or something." "I know, Dad, but I was actually building the future." He nodded, understanding finally filling his eyes. "You certainly were." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and decisions. By evening, I was alone in the office again, reviewing the final details for Monday's acquisition proposal. The numbers were clear: Morgan Technologies would be absorbed into Quantum Solutions, their legacy preserved but transformed under new leadership. I picked up my old laptop, running my fingers over its worn surface. Every dismissive comment, every doubtful glance, every mockery of my hobby had been absorbed by this machine, transformed into lines of code that would eventually revolutionize an industry. My phone buzzed one last time, another text from Uncle David. Alexandra, I know Monday's meeting isn't really about a partnership. I've seen the numbers. I know what's coming. Just, thank you for doing this yourself instead of letting some stranger dismantle everything we built. I typed back, family takes care of family, Uncle David, even when they don't always understand each other. Setting down my phone, I looked out at the city lights coming alive as dusk settled over Seattle. Sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. It's about turning doubt into determination, mockery into motivation, and yes, sometimes turning hobbies into empires. Monday would come, and with it, a new chapter would begin. But tonight, in the quiet of my office, I allowed myself a moment to appreciate the journey. From the laughingstock of family gatherings to the CEO who would save their legacy, it was a path I never could have predicted, but one I wouldn't change for anything. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's building something so undeniable that those who doubted you have no choice but to recognize its worth. And sometimes, just sometimes, it starts with a hobby that nobody else believed in. The end.